Greetings, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. What an honor to have you join us today. What an honor to have these three people up on the screen for this conversation. I am so looking forward to this today. So without further ado, let's get rolling here. And I'm going to open up with a little bit of a statement, talk for a little bit, frame up what we want to talk about today. And I'm going to introduce our guests. Consumption matters, folks, in this country. There's no two ways about it. How we eat, how we drink shapes everything around us in our life. Our health, the health of others, the health of this planet is affected by food, the way we produce it, and the way that we handle it. You know, quite frankly, there's a lot of things to talk about food. Food is irradiated, milk's pasteurized, genes are modified, water's contaminated, air's poisoned, whatever you want to say. The aliens are coming. Quite frankly, that's one I think you can bank on is the aliens coming. That's the one I lean into the most. But we grow and consume a lot of food in this country. And we need to be thinking about what are we all doing to increase consumption? How are we changing consumer perception? How are we elevating growers and influencing legislative perspectives? And we should also ask ourselves, should we accept what it is and not ask why and what are my options, right? So I believe we need to have conversations about the true value of food, the true cost of food. And I hope that this chat today exactly sparks that in everybody. So it's an honor to welcome my guests today. Please welcome Dr. Mano Basu, who is a Vice President of Science Policy at CropLife America, Leslie Bonci, who is the owner of Active Eating with Leslie Bonci, and Ken Cook, the president and co-founder of the Environmental Working Group. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the broadcast today.
Thank you for having us.
It's absolutely
great to be here.
Absolutely an honor. This conversation, this broadcast started as an exchange back and forth between Leslie and I on social media. And we were talking about the Dirty Dozen, and she posted something on it, and I commented back. And I thought to myself, this conversation needs to happen. I am somebody who loves what Leslie and dietitians do in this world. I think they're unsung heroes in so many ways. So I got to thinking, it's like, we need to have a conversation that comes from the perspective of what this broadcast is about. And this platform is really all about lifting up ideas and the people, driving love and kindness into conversations and trying to find positive conversations that inspire people. And so that's really where the basis of this comes from. And I'm a big believer that disagreeing doesn't necessarily mean you're wrong. I mean, it could, but not necessarily mean you're wrong. But it also means we probably need to talk a little bit more to better understand each other. And I think that's important really as well. So without further ado, I thought we would get the ball rolling a little bit to get to know each other. And I'm going to do it a little bit in a non-traditional way. I just thought this was, I think if we want to know who we are, we should ask each other who we are. So I'm going to open up this way. Mano, I'm going to open up with you with the very first question, if you wouldn't mind. Could you please tell me what the Environmental Working Group is? And then Ken, I'm going to come to you with the flip of that question and ask you what what CropLife America is.
Thank you for starting with that great question.
Mano, I'm going to tell you right now, if you think that one's great,
you don't make it any easy, do you? I mean, I should have researched about Environmental Working Group, but again, I would say who doesn't know about Environmental Working Group? They have been there for years, and a lot of work on environmental issues. So again, I would say not-for-profit organization looking into environmental issues, environmental pollution. Certainly, they have done a lot of work in the past on pesticide issues and other environmental pollutants and contaminants. I did have the opportunity to interact with Scott Faber. He and I shared a similar past. Both of us worked at the Grocery Manufacturers Association at one point of time. And I've invited him to our conferences at GMA and other places. So certainly I'm fully aware of EWG and the work they do. It's great to meet Ken virtually though here. I'm sure hopefully one of these days our paths will cross, but I know recently EWG is supportive of more funding for EPA and getting more scientists within the agency, something that we really support, more funding, more resources for the agencies that regulate and does the risk assessment. So again, we'll take this opportunity and thank Ken and EWG for their support to EPA.
Nice. Ken, anything we missed? Anything you want to come behind about EWG that he didn't cover?
Well, we're 30 this year. I know I don't look a day over 20, but we
30?
are 30. Yeah. No, I know.
You look damn good. You look damn good.
Don't go on. Yeah, we started 30 years ago, and the co-founder is Richard Wiles, who was one of the country's leading pesticide experts, came from the National Academies of Science. And when he came to EWG, we published our first report called Pesticides in Children's Food. At the same time, the National Academy published their landmark report, Pesticides in the Diets of Infants and Children, that led to pesticide policy reforms in '96. And we have built out the organization from there. We have about 75 people now. We have a staff of toxicologists, chemists, PhDs, master's level, database programmers, and so forth. CropLife America, I go way back with CropLife America, including my friend Jay Vroom. He and I, we often disagreed on screen or in press releases, dueling one another because CropLife America represents the pesticide industry in Washington. I know we don't say pesticide usually, we say crop protection chemicals. Yes. Okay. And we'll go back to that maybe. Why we can't say that anymore. I have been invited by Jay to a number of events. I've spoken, I believe, to your Washington event some years back. A lot of respect for the way CropLife America professionally approaches its task, which is to, make sure that even though it's, we might disagree on what science it's based on, basically trying to ensure that there's science-based regulation of pesticides in this country. And mostly oppose stricter regulation of pesticides. I think fair to say, I can't think of any instances where CropLife America has come along and agreed with EPA when it's proposed a ban or a restriction. But yeah, I mean, that's your business. And like I said, we go way back. Jay is still a friend, by the way. I'm still in touch with Jay all the time.
Nice.
Great to meet you,
Mano, anything you want to add?
Yeah, just to quickly chime in, we are 90 years this year.
Wow.
Certainly, I have not been with CropLife for 90 years, but my communications colleague would say you did not take this opportunity to remind that CropLife's been there for 90 years. And of course, we are all for science-based regulations. And sometimes we agree with EPA, sometimes we disagree with EPA. But as long as the decision has been made based on solid science, it's something we all have to accept and move on, whether it's a good decision for us or a bad decision for us. But fully supportive of a science-based decision, risk-based decision. I think that's how we have to look at regulatory decisions being made in the country.
Love it. Leslie, you have a master's in public health and you focus on nutritional sciences, which is the relationship between diet and disease, correct? Yeah? Cool. Is there anything you want to add about that I didn't, I just kind of, I can ask you what CropLife and EWG was, but it seems a little repetitive. So I just figured that was a good way to go.
Well, and I think one of the most important things from my perspective, and we've been a dietitian now for 40 years, so a long time, and population includes working with professional athletes that are always trying to do the best for each other and for themselves, as well as real people. And I think at the end of the day is trying to cut through the confusion and really get people back to the plate without being afraid, without feeling guilty, without feeling judged. And at the end of the day, to check the box of I'm nourished to the best of my ability. Those are the types of things that I am passionate about because it's important for myself, for my family. I'm a grandmother. I want to make sure that my kids and my little ones are eating the things that are good for them to eat. And this idea of reaching across the aisles. I truly am the master of the negotiation because I want everybody having a seat at the table. Their plates might not all be the same, but everybody has a plate in front of them.
Absolutely. Love it. Thank you for sharing that. Let's do a little housekeeping real quick. Ken, tell me, how's EWG funded? Tell me some of your key donors. And Mano, I'm coming with you with the exact same question.
Yeah, we're funded. Let's see, we have about a $14 million budget. About $3.2 million comes from online small donors. And probably about another 2 or 3 comes from major foundations. We get support from the private sector through our certification program for personal care products and cleaning products. We have developed a third-party standard, a la organic in the at least structurally, where we set the standard and we do the certification. That brings in probably 2.5 million, something like that. Major donors, people of means, come in with the balance. So we have over time received support from organic food companies mostly for the work we did on labeling genetically modified organisms in food. Really, they set up the organization within EWG initially. That support has been gone a long time now. They was separate 501c3, but yeah, we have received support. We get support from people in the organic industry. direct support at our dinners and events we have and so forth. So we've been pretty open about that. You can read all about that in the press releases we put out.
Absolutely. Mano, over to you. Talk to me. How's CropLife America Fund and key donors?
Yeah, again, I mean, all the information is publicly available. We are the same $14 million annual budget as well. Most of our funding, I would say 99% of our funding comes from the pesticide industry. The big ones and the small ones. We also have some associate members who are consultants or, could be a law firm who are, again, part of our membership structure. So almost all our dues come from the membership.
Right. And Leslie, just again, for housekeeping issues, do you have any financial ties to either one of these gentlemen?
I do not.
There we go. All right. That's clear. Thank you. Thank you all for sharing that. I appreciate that very much. All right, let's work our way down and start working our way towards the dirty dozen. And so everybody has a little point of reference. From my perspective, I can remember sitting on the sales desk in 2004 when the very first dirty dozen list came out and having some of those items in my cooler. So I lived it. I get it. I understand. I remember exactly how I felt the first time I saw it. I also remember how I felt once I saw what it was and kind of got my head wrapped around it a little bit. So I can go back with this a very long way. So just want to throw that on the table. So I've been there, done that. So let's open this up. And I want to kind of build towards talking about the dirty dozen, but I think there's some things we need to put on the table and get people to understand. And Ken, I'm going to open up this first question with you. And I'm going to, and just so you all know, I'm going to throw questions out to everybody. I just, kind of be fair and who goes first, second type of a deal. It doesn't really matter. I just thought, okay, this makes sense and trying to kind of a little balance. So just so you all know that. Ken, first question to you going down this trail. What is a pesticide?
Well, a pesticide is any kind of chemical mostly that adversely affects insects, weeds, fungus, any pest that affects really crops and however else it might be applied in the home, for example.
Sure.
Anytime you want to kill a bug, kill a weed, a plant that's out of place, deal with fungus, deal with rats, whatever it is, one of your options is a chemical that's designed to kill them.
Anybody want to add anything to that?
I would say, the way we look at pesticide is it's any substance, mixture of substance, which is used to control pests. I mean, this could be biological, chemical, physical. Yes, there are a lot more chemical tools, but they are certainly biological and physical means for controlling pests. And that's what we see as pesticide. Any mechanism, any tool, substance that you use to control, manage pests that is affecting crop production or that is affecting, household pests like rats and mice and whatnot. So,
okay, cool.
Broader version. Yeah.
So, Mano, on that train of thought a little bit, I'm gonna throw my next question to you first, and again back to everybody else. Leslie, I'm sorry I didn't ask. Did you have anything you wanted to add to that? Please do, and feel free to jump in. If I screw up. Thank you. So, Mano, my question to you is: what is a safe pesticide?
Good question. What is a safe pesticide?
I'm 2 for 2. I'm 2 for 2 on the good questions. I love it. I'm keeping track now.
Pesticides can be used safely. That's what I would say. Now, there are for the specific purpose.
Right. I'm not asking about, well, hold on. But in the context of the question, I'm asking is what is a safe pesticide? Not about using it safely. I think that's two separate uses of the word. I just want to be clear about where my direction was on the question.
I would say then a safe pesticide is the one which is applied as per the label. Because in the US, for any pesticide, there is a label, and the label determines how you should use the product, when you should use the product, what condition, what rate, how many times a year. So I would say safe pesticide is one which has been reviewed, regulated in the US EPA, and there is a label which determines the actual use of the pesticide. And as long as it is used as per the defined label scope, then that's the safe pesticide in my mind.
Ken, would you like to come in behind that? Leslie, please.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's a distinction between, I think, what's legal and what's safe. And I think, Mano, you were describing the legal situation, but we have many examples where pesticides that have been on the market and proclaimed safe by the agency and by the registrants, the pesticide companies, and of course by CropLife, and the ancestral version of CropLife, the National Ag Chemicals Association, where they vouched for its safety right up until the time EPA banned it. Right. So, for example, chlorpyrifos is right in the crosshairs now of regulatory action, California and federally. Came on the market, was registered in 1965, was used on all kinds of produce for many, many years. And all during that time, and even until the moment when EPA said, you know what, this is not safe for kids, we have to take it off the market, the agency said it was safe. So part of this is a temporal issue, which I think factors into how consumers think about this, because time and time again, you might call it whack-a-mole, you might call it a morning surprise, whatever you want to call it, but time and time again, consumers who, because this is the way the system is structured, registrants of pesticides go to EPA, they submit their tests, they submit the science and so forth, it's debated back and forth, sometimes more, sometimes less. And then periodically, the agency looks back with fresh eyes. Well, the fresh eyes tend to be more modern science. And again and again, there have been instances where chlorpyrifos, endosulfan, aldicarb, carbofuran, lindane, methylparathion, on and on. All of these pesticides that the agency said were safe, just as you described it, are suddenly not safe. And so there's a temporal component to this that I think is important to understand. And I think consumers remember, hey, you know, maybe one reason I'm not trusting whether or not this pesticide is safe, or whether maybe I should opt for organic or the clean 15. Don't forget, the other part of the dirty dozen is the clean 15, the conventional fruits and vegetables that don't have high levels of pesticide residue because of the types of pesticides used and when they're used. But I think this is in the back, at least from our research and our interactions with people online, and we reach about 25 million a year. This is in people's minds, not just about pesticides. It's about all kinds of food additives. It's about the contaminants in tap water that the federal agencies and state agencies said, hey, this is all fine. And then, oh, it's Tuesday, it's banned. You have to restrict it. You have to regulate it. And because of this dynamic, I think that was one reason why we originally put out the Shopper's Guide to Pesticides and Produce that has the clean 15 on one side and the dirty dozen on the other.
Right. Mano, anything come alongside?
Yeah,
as well,
I mean,
please.
you know what you described, Ken? Yes, absolutely. But here's the beauty of what you described. Science evolves, as you said, right? We learn more about science. And as science evolves, again, this system which regulates pesticide uses that science which evolved, uses that understanding to make the necessary regulatory decision of whether removing a pesticide from the marketplace or keeping it or changing how it is used, where it is used, what dose it is used to protect the general population. This happens all the places in the regulated industry, right? I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if for an FDA drug, which was considered safe, the science evolved and things changed.
Oh, all the time.
Happens.
Totally.
So that is the human nature, where as we evolve our understanding, as we generate more data about a product, and EPA is taking the steps of, okay, there's new data coming in, there's new science available. Let's take a fresh look of what's going on, take that input into consideration as we make the regulatory decisions. So yes, when we know what we know, that's best based on the best available science, and as we evolve, those decisions may change. So from a consumer perspective, from even if you look at the pandemic, our understanding of the virus, right, how it changed and how quickly it changed over time, and the public adapted to, and the regulatory agency, whether it's CDC, FDA, and EPA was involved in the sanitizing and the biocides and whatnot. All these agencies work together, and as and when on a daily basis, as the science evolved, they took decisions. And to an extent, it gave the public a perception of what's going on. Why are the agencies changing their mind on a daily basis? Don't they know what's going on? No, because science is evolving so fast, especially on the pandemic virus example, that they had to make those changes. And that's what I would say, going back to your point, as science evolves, yes, we will see decisions which which are made that we are not based on new data that we were not aware simply in the past.
But you're making it sound a little more collegial and scientific than I think it turns out to be, right? Because this list of pesticides I read off just now, all of which have been banned or restricted at every turn. And again, you weren't there. It was some of your pesticide lobbyist forebears. You strongly oppose these actions by EPA on carbofuran, aldicarb, lindane, methylparathion, diminazide, azanphosmethyl, all of these CropLife America and the registrants ferociously fought the new data and the regulatory proposal that was coming from the agency. Drug manufacturers oftentimes do too. I mean, they put drugs on the market and they've done human trials and the drugs still end up killing people sometimes. They have to take them off. But I just want to make clear that there's a lot of combat involved here. It's not just the scientific process unfolding. The pesticide industry aggressively fights all of these efforts to regulate pesticides by EPA.
So I hear your point. And yes, I mean, as science evolves and as science comes up, as a scientist, we review data, we have questions. It's never based on one single publication or two publications. It is that back and forth between the scientific community. And I work extensively with my member scientists. Again, EPA has great scientists. Our members are also some of the best scientists in the world. They have questions about the data, questions about publications, and the validity of the statistical methods used, the tests employed, are they the best? There is the registrations are conducted based on a battery of tests. They have the data, they know the molecule, they have worked on it for years. So they ask those type of questions. And I think as those questions are being asked, yes, you could see it from an optics perspective, that's a pushback, but it's also helping the understanding of the science of where the data is coming from. And that back and forth leads to decision one way or the other. In some cases, the decision could be a ban. And yes, that exchange that happened between industry scientists and EPA scientists led to a better understanding, addressing some unanswered questions. And in some cases, if it is a ban, yes, fair. And in some cases, the agency may say, okay, we did not think about these additional uses, or this is the way to reduce exposure, reduce risk, and this is how you can still continue use for different crops, different uses, and these are the changes or PPEs that need to be included. So it's always that conversation, and as a scientist and within the scientific community, if we don't encourage that dialogue and that information exchange and the ability to ask each other questions, then we are really not doing any favor to science.
And
of course.
That is the practical application, because being in the trenches each and every day and working with people to help them nourish their bodies the best that they possibly can. From my perspective, the last thing that we want to be doing is making people feel guilty, judged, or fearful when it comes to produce intake. 1 in 10 people in the United States right now is getting enough produce every day. That means 9 are not. And so as people think about foods that they're eating, oh my God, I can't eat this because of this, that's a problem. That creates a deficit, not in the right direction. And all of the study, I hear people macros all the time. No, we're talking about phytos today. Phytonutrients. Phytonutrients are in plant, and each fruit and vegetable brings different phytonutrients to the plate, to the bowl, and to the glass. And so the goal here is to be inclusive with eating enough within somebody's budget, within what is available to them, within their food preference. I'm passionate about this because I think it is critically important. And so when we sometimes have scare tactics of what we're doing, that doesn't really help to move the needle at all. And heaven knows there are a lot of advocacy groups that are really concerned about the lack of enough fruit and vegetable each and every day. So, finding that way to perhaps connect over correct might not be so bad if you're really looking to move the needle, move the fork, move the hand in terms of vegetable.
Can I ask a question about that? Yeah. So I would say if you had to line up the top priorities of the nutrition field with respect to the U.S. diet over the past, 50 years? Increasing consumption of fresh produce would have to be right up there. I don't know what the other 2 or 3 might be, but wouldn't that be number one? And your profession has been the principal force responsible for making that case. That's your professional responsibility. So here's my question. What do you think you've been doing that has been so ineffective? Why do you think, after the billions of dollars that have been spent and the passionate pleas that I'm hearing from you now, which I respect, I happen to feel the same way about produce consumption, and we pretty much say it on our website, no question about that. But the only place where we've seen a breakthrough is in the organic produce sector. Mm-hmm. That is the only place. Everywhere else, again, I'm painting with a broad brush here, Leslie, but in every other realm, over time, your profession has failed to make it better. Now, you're also working with the worst marketers in the food business with the fresh produce industry, but even accounting for that, the only segment that has really outperformed is the segment that's organic fruit and vegetables. Just in recent years, both in sales volume and in quantity, organic has gone up and conventional has gone down. So I'm just asking, do you think there might be something, maybe aligning yourself with the pesticide industry overly, not listening to people when they say we're concerned about pesticides, that they should just forget all of that and just listen to your nutrition advice? I don't think that's the case. We have a different approach. We think they can eat plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables without the pesticides. And now with a $60+ billion organic industry, it's getting easier and easier all the time. That's the segment that's growing. Conventionals shrinking. But the main point I'm curious about is, what do you think nutritionists have done wrong that it's been such a colossal failure to increase fruit and vegetable consumption?
I would agree with you that certainly people are not getting the needs met across the board. And I don't think that there's any one organization that's taking ownership of failure per se. We have work to do. And that's really what the challenge is right now. We have work to do. No matter what sector we are in, is how do we move the needle to increase that consumption? Is it better availability? Is it affordability? Is it palatability? If not one of those things, is all of those things. And that's going to be continuing. That is not going away. And that's what we do.
Yeah. But what do you make it?
And to keep those things going. However, that being said, is that casting the broadest net that we can to give people access to all types of fruits and vegetables, everything from fresh as well as other forms, be it in a can, be
absolutely,
and be it dried. That's what we have to do. We are now confronted with a lot of people that are food insecure. We have a lot of people that are equipment insecure. They don't have a working stove. They don't have a working refrigerator. They have to have other ways to access food. This is the reality of life right now. Mm-hmm. And then, we also have a lot of eating plans that say, don't eat carbohydrates. Well, you know what? That's what a plant is. So hello. So, it kind of this accumulation of some misinformation,
a lot of bad advice,
as well as availability. And so I think that puts on all of us to say, how can we come together collaboratively to move this needle in all of our different spaces and all of our different areas of expertise?
I think
it's moving in organic. What do you make of that, Leslie, that it's moving with respect to organic? It's been an incredible success story, like some years double-digit growth. Why do you explain that?
And that's a wonderful thing, and that's one choice. Organic produce is one choice. It is not the only choice. And that,
no, of course not.
What consumers aren't always hearing is, it's just this. Well, no, it's not just this. We are looking at nutritional value. If we take a label away from something and look at nutritional value, the fluid content, the fiber content, the vitamins and minerals, the phytonutrients that are there, that's really what produce, from a dietitian perspective, that's what we want it to provide to people. You're getting things you're not going to get from a pork chop, and you're not going to get from a glass of milk.
I agree. I don't eat meat. So what do you think about pesticides? Do you think they're safe? Do you think pesticides are an issue at all in food?
You know
I think-
what?
well,
First of all, this is not my expertise, but what I do think is critically
Well,
important.
you're writing that we're scaring people, so you must have some view about it.
You know what? I think that to me, the issue is that when we limit people's choices in terms of what they're going to buy, the product that they're going to buy, that's not helpful in any way, shape, or form. And when we look at trying to put things out on the market that are safe for people to consume, to allow farmers to grow food that people will consume, then we really have to think about what are the tools that are necessary in order to make that happen. I mean, these are things that I think they keep me up at night, but they're things that are really important, is how do we find that balance across the board? And, that's why expertise is a critical component of this, to be able to really look at the evidence, to look at the science, to look at what impact is and what impact is not, and how this all has an influence on what it is that people choose to consume as consumers.
Todd, if I can quickly chime in.
Chime in, sir.
Thank you very much. And to Ken's point, I've seen the EWG reports on Dirty Dozen, and I've seen that there is a shift where you are promoting eating more produce and incorporating, and that's a great thing. That's absolutely the message that we need to send people. As Leslie said, 9 out of 10 are not eating enough produce. Whether it is conventional, whether it is organic, whichever form of produce they can eat, they should definitely eat more produce in their diet. So appreciate the language in EWG's messaging. So that's one part. Second part is, from my perspective, if the residue is under the limit, and if the residue is what EPA, FDA has said it's below that, and in the monitoring data suggests it's many folds below even what the maximum residue limit or tolerance is, that is absolutely safe. Now, what you also identify in your report is where there are violations, and these are 2 types of violations, right? Where a pesticide is not approved for a specific crop and it is still showing up. Yes, that is a concern. Or when a pesticide residue in a specific commodity is higher than that legal limit, yes, that is a concern as well. So those kind of violations. So what I think is, from your report, what you're identifying, and it's always good. As a scientist, I can never say someone else reviewing the data with a fresh set of eyes is a bad thing. It's always good thing of whatever available science and data is available. If someone's willing to spend their time and review that data, and I know how extensive the data set is and how many data points there are to review and do that statistical analysis, is a huge favor. But what is the purpose? If the purpose is to identify, hey, look, there are these types of violations. How do we address these violations and make our food system even safer than what it is, and focus on those? There's a high number. Do we need education? Do we need outreach? How do we reach out to growers? Who do we coordinate with, whether it's USDA, EPA, FDA? There's a huge benefit and a huge piece of information in the USDA PDP data set, PMP data set from FDA, as well as what you do from EWG perspective. So that's where my mind is. Thank you very much, Todd. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I don't listen. This is why you're here. This is why you're all here to chat, right? And I want to kind of round this up, button up a little, because I want to get into the Dirty Dozen specifically and have questions in relation to that and take us there. But what I hear you all saying is something that I think is incredibly important and lacking in this country, is that we don't have a clear understanding of what the actual value of food is, right? Because there's a lot of people that just eat food for calories, folks. And there's a lot of places for 99 cents you can drive through and pick up a calorie, but not pick up a meal. And I think that you're really, in my mind, illustrating that beautifully, that as a society, as people of this planet globally, we need to start to recognize the value of food and what that actually means. There's a connectivity, as I said in the beginning of the show. How we do this affects how we do this over here. And I think you're summing that up really, really well. And I want to go down this trail because I do want to get in deeper into the weeds. Oh, look at that. I made a joke about produce. I said weeds. I love that. I always bring my best material when you guys come. But I want to, I want to frame up a little bit more before I get into the Dirty Dozen, because I think there's some areas that I want to clearly understand before I jump into this. So if you'll humor me a little bit, one of the things that I find incredibly interesting is that, and I think you would all agree with me, and I'll throw this out, and if you disagree, please say so, but plants learn to resist pesticides. I think we know that to be true. We've seen it. It's out there. There's record. I mean, take a look at It's pretty low hanging fruit, again, with another produce joke, that they do. So my question is, as we lay this up to understand the value here a little bit, what are the similarities between exposing a plant to a pesticide and a human to a pesticide? Our bodies do our bodies eventually know what they are, and can we learn to resist them like a plant does? So I'll have anybody who wants to grab that one, and then we'll move forward.
Help me a little bit.
Sure.
Again, from a terminology perspective, and as a scientist, resistance, tolerance, a lot of these things mean different things. When you say plant resist pesticide,
well, look at Roundup.
What do you mean by that?
Sure, there's plants that resist Roundup. We know that to be a fact, right? There's stuff that's out there, and so my question is, if a plant can morph itself into working away from what a pesticide does, become it's less effective over time. My question is can our bodies do the same thing as a plant? It's a kind of a yes or no, really, unless you have some data behind it. I'm just curious.
Can our bodies adapt to resist?
Yeah, can our bodies adapt to the pesticides and learn to resist them, similar to how a plant resists Roundup?
That's two different. I mean, it seems a very simple question on the surface, but it is from a scientific and technical perspective. As I start peeling the layers in my mind, where do I even start? The plants and our bodies are two different complex organisms. We work very differently. You can take one cell from a plant and regrow the whole plant. You can't do that with human. A completely different molecular mechanism and what our processes are from digestion and whatnot. So not necessarily, I would say, as the plant could resist a pesticide, our bodies would adapt. And again, you have to look at the dose and you have to look at the levels and the concentration of pesticide the plant is exposed to in a field condition versus, what your exposure could or couldn't be through a dietary route of exposure, because the residue levels are way, way, way lower than what the application levels may be. So it is simple what you're asking in general terms of English, but as we get into the science and the data, it's not as simple a question that I can straight away answer you in a yes or a no.
All right, Ken, do you have something you want to add to this? And not I have a follow-up
Well,
I want to throw out there to kind of sum this up a little bit.
Yeah, well, I think the working assumption of the regulatory system is that if a registrant can get their chemical through the system, that it can be used as Mano suggested, used according to the label. That's often debated because a lot of times the registrants want to maximize the amount that can be sprayed in the industry. There's pushback from the agency, et cetera. But I think the key thing here is, and it's not exactly on point, but pretty close. The key assumption is we're just going to keep legalizing exposures one on top of another without any attempt to ask some basic questions, such as a variation on yours, I think. Does it matter that we might have a dozen neurotoxic insecticides or more, maybe 20 or 30 or 50 in daily intake? Does that matter?
Right.
In a regulatory sense? Nah, we don't care. Just add more and add industrial chemicals on top of that. Now, I know this is not an area that the nutrition profession concerns itself with. I wish that weren't the case. But the fact is that increasingly, scientists are beginning to say, look, there are some basic risk assessment questions, a variation of the one you just asked, I think, Todd, where we're not ever going to be able to come up with an answer. Let's think about exposure reduction.
Sure, 100%. Yeah, well, and so let me throw it this way. Let me just, and if you wouldn't mind, I'm kind of bringing this around because then I want to get into this. But so if somebody wanted to better understand all this, I mean, is there any studies or research out there that says, let's just throw this out as a hypothetical. You're making dinner tonight and you're making a pasta salad with vegetables. And my question is this. So you've got the pasta over here, pesticide, whatever it is, what's on the pasta, what's over here on the vegetable, what happens when they commingle in your body? Do we have any data on all those combining inside of us? Is there anything out there? Please.
A couple of things. There is a cumulative risk assessment that the agency does. Again, based on just pesticide. Industrial chemicals are completely different. I'm not going to get into there because I simply don't know. But from a pesticide point of view, there is cumulative risk assessment. When the agency looks into dietary exposure, they look into dietary exposure coming from all different types of food. What kind of food the American public is eating. There's a whole chart of the grains and meat and what are the residue levels. So the way the residue levels are identified and determined based on supervised field trial, looking at the overall consumption of the different kinds of food within the US population, and then the residues are calculated what is a safe level. It still has to be under the overall limit of safety that is determined for one pesticide. It cannot ever go more than the level of safety, the safety factor that has been determined by the agency. So they call it a risk cup. And if you want to go into a risk cup, it is a completely different conversation. I'll not bore you to death here, but those kind of data points are taken into consideration when the agency does the exposure analysis and sets the limit for residues for a given pesticide.
You said that last
Leslie, go ahead.
Comment about nutrition and nutrition not caring, I would say, no, that really isn't true. I think those of us that are in this profession really do care. It is our job. It is our passion. It is our commitment at the end of the day to help people eat the best that they possibly can. And quite frankly, when we are looking at, from my perspective, my degree is in public health, right? This is about decreasing the risk of disease. It is preventive. It is proactive in terms of what it is that people eat. So one of the ways to do that, let's increase our intake of plants, fruits and vegetables, phytonutrients.
Yeah.
This is what we want. So making that plate as inclusive as possible is what needs to be happening. What we want people to do without some red lines and some fear that is keeping them away from that aisle entirely. That's absolutely what we do not want to do.
And I think
the dietitian.
Can I just respond to the two? Go ahead.
Absolutely, Ken.
For Mano, you said the key thing. I don't think it was exactly what Todd was getting at, but it's one pesticide at a time, right? In other words, when EPA does cumulative exposures, they mean from all the routes that one pesticide could get to them. But they're not talking about, say, 2 neurotoxic pesticides, whether there's interaction. I mean, it's mind-boggling the science that would be required to look at mixtures like that, and so we don't. And then to your point, Leslie, look, I'm all about. I would love for your profession to finally find some success and turn this thing around on fruits and vegetables. But the only people who have turned it around, and this is another variation on not scaring people. I don't think we should make fun of people or scare them because they're reasonably concerned about pesticides in the diet. And I hear nutritionists doing that all the time, diminishing the fact that pesticides are in food. When in fact, as I just described, many of these pesticides were in food for decades. You, along with the pesticide industry and the registrants and the agency, said they're perfectly safe. And then, oops, gosh, they're not safe. Well, they were never safe. We have new science now that tells us that, but it's not unreasonable, I think, for a shopper to think, well, you know what? These agencies sometimes get it wrong. Sometimes the science is too slow. Sometimes it's delayed by industry lobbying and the other tricks of the trade. And it takes decades to reach a regulatory decision that was obvious decades earlier. Alar is a perfect example, actually. But the fact of the matter is, we can have both. We can have plenty of fresh produce. Mano, I appreciate your compliment. That's not a change in our presentation. The very first report, because I wrote the foreword to it, Pesticides in Children's Food, my foreword said, never throw out produce. We disavowed the Alar episode. We thought that was the wrong way it should go in terms of consumer behavior. You should eat plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables. It's much worse. We said this, first report, 1992, 93. Much worse risk not eating produce than the pesticides that are in it. We've been consistent saying that all along. That doesn't mean, as I hear again from too many nutritionists, that there's no reason to be concerned about pesticides in the diet because EPA says they're fine. Well, they might say that for a while, but then funny thing, they change their mind. And I think people going to the shopper's guide, buy organic for these fruits and vegetables that are heavily laden with pesticides, just give you a choice. We could talk about the methodology all day. It's
all day long.
We've changed it. But and then here's another group of fruits and vegetables that aren't organic. And we, for the first time, came out with that list too and said, you know what, the way the types of pesticides that are used, when they're used, the residue that's not there at the end for the consumer anyway, might be exposing the farm worker, and that's a problem. But these are options. And the fact that now the organic produce industry has exploded while the conventional produce industry is stumbling along, barely keeping up with population growth, that should tell us that our messaging maybe ought to embrace holistically what consumers think instead of telling them what nutritionists think they should think.
Well, I think too.
Ken, let me just intervene a little bit. Ken, I know you have said this a few times now that the organic market is exploding, and it is great that the organic market is getting a double-digit growth. But let's also look at the size of the organic market in the overall big picture, and I simply don't know. So yes, from your opinion and what you know, it is exploding. Yeah. It is getting a double digit. But you know, when you look at the overall big food and conventional food, you may see conventional food growing at a snail's pace, yes, and not enjoying the same double-digit growth that you talk about in organic, but it's also because of the size and the scope. And you know, this happens all the time when you are too big, and you know, conventional food is, let's say, 95% of the food production and consumption, you will not see double-digit growth in conventional food production. You will see double-digit growth in those smaller fractions.
Absolutely.
This happens all the time, and I don't think
it's just a math.
That's not the fact.
Hold on.
Well, but it's
Ken, 1 second. Let's back up, take a breath for a second. The bottom line issue I hear you all saying, and where we're at with this, is that I think that where we're at, it's not really about fear, and it's not about all this. It's really about consumers should be allowed to make a choice and have access to information from every angle, right? Because we are the CEOs of our bodies, and we're the CEOs of our families, and we have the right to know, and make our own value choice, right? I go back to what I said earlier about learning to understand the value of the food. So Ken, I totally am on board. I get where your point is, Mano, Leslie, all of you. I get where we're trying to head with this from every single angle. And quite frankly, I don't think any of you are wrong from the perspective of the angle you're taking to try to increase consumption. I get that. But drilling it back down to valuing our food and understanding that is something that I think we don't do a good job in this country. And I think it's responsibility of anybody that's in the food business to help educate and understand and allow consumers to see what those choices are. Because going back to my question about whether chemicals commingle, it's a fair question to ask, because I don't know the answer to that in my own body, what's happening today. And I think people are concerned about that. So I want to move a little bit into exactly what the dirty dozen is, just to frame it, because we've been talking about, we didn't kind of like, what the hell is it? So I'm going to do the same thing as we did this morning, as we started today, introduction. Leslie, Mano, I'm going to throw this one at you. Could you just kind of frame up what the dirty dozen is? And Ken, I'll come back to you to add some thoughts to that. Can you share what your perception is of what the dirty dozen is?
So from my perspective, I would say those produce items that are listed as the dirty dozen are the ones that are deemed to have an amount of pesticide in them that is considered unacceptable and harmful to health.
Okay, fair. Mano, anything you want to throw into that?
That being said, and this is also, we were thinking of, as Mano had talked about, it's a risk, it's an intake, it's an exposure. It's all of this is critically important. You know, would I be thrilled if somebody sat down to a pint of strawberries? Hell yes, I would. But is that realistically what's happening? No, it isn't. Somebody might have a strawberry or two or three, and should they enjoy those without any worry? Absolutely, they should.
But is that because of pesticides, because of fear? No, that's because people don't understand food. We don't do enough job. We don't teach our kids how to eat right. We don't do a good job feeding them in schools.
I think it's also because we demonize some food items, and then people get a little worried about what they are or are not consuming. And yes, I'd love everybody to actually learn more about their food. That's critically important. And I think that's what we try and do overall.
Fair. Mano, you want to add anything to the Dirty Dozen?
No,
or
I think
nail it?
Leslie has covered it. What I would say is, from my perspective, the Dirty Dozen is, all the top 12, dozen, yes, where there are residues, but I only then focus on what are those in those 12 where you have violations in residue. If there isn't a violation in residue, then truly it's not the Dirty Dozen. Violations are concerns. Other than that list, I don't find it useful.
Okay, great. And so Ken, let's go to you then. Tell me a two-part question for you, because I think it's relevant to tie it together. A, what is the Dirty Dozen? But I would like for you to touch on where the data points. Where's the data come from? If you wouldn't mind blending that together, or however you want to answer that. But I think it's important that comes together.
So here's how we came up with the idea that we should do this. We started off as a policy operation, and we wanted to utilize our scientific assessment analysis of pesticide residues and dietary exposure and workplace exposure. Our experts felt like we should pursue the regulatory process, and we have, as Mano suggested, we've been engaged in dozens and dozens and dozens of regulatory fights within the agency over all kinds of pesticide decisions that are coming forward. Those are all one pesticide at a time, oftentimes one small group of crops at a time. We may look at all routes of exposure, water, air, dietary, and so forth, but fundamentally it's one pesticide at a time. What we kept hearing from people, though, was, well, what should I do? I can't find or afford organic, especially when we started doing this in 2004, right? The organic industry was, I don't have to tell you, buddy.
You don't have to tell me.
Right? So what do? Should we just go ahead and eat anything? We're worried about pesticides. We give farmers credit when they cut back on pesticides, but somehow when consumers want to do it, it's wrong. So we were hearing this from consumers and thinking, well, look, we don't have a really good way of telling people produce item by produce item how to think about all the pesticides that might be on them, like strawberries and spinach and kale and all these others. They often have multiple pesticides. So we looked at the PDP data, and we wanted to do two things. We wanted to say, okay, if you're concerned about pesticides, you're right to be concerned. We disagree with CropLife America, with the pesticide industry. And I think we disagree with a lot of nutritionists. It's not crazy to be concerned about that, because this agency will ban this stuff from time to time, and it should have been banned decades before they banned it. So you're not crazy. So if you're concerned, what produce items have the highest number of different residues and highest amount of residues? And we worked with, in fact, we'd be interested if you have different ideas about how to put it together. We've talked about it for years. Maybe we haven't done it the best thing, but we know there's no risk assessment process to add up mixtures. The mixtures are in our bodies. We tested umbilical cord blood and found an average of 200 toxic chemicals in cord blood, including lots of pesticides, including ones that were banned 30 years before we drew the samples. So we are mixtures of industrial chemicals along with all the wonderful nutrients and other things that we need to live. And over time, scientists have become concerned about this, even though they can't regulate mixtures, right? So we decided, well, let's let people know what the most contaminated ones are. We don't enter this into the regulatory system at EPA. It would have no meaning. Of course not. The agency wouldn't know what to do with it, but consumers just want to say, what should I avoid? I mean, is there something I should emphasize buying organic? Simple questions like that. So and then we paired the Dirty Dozen. We spent a lot of time thinking about this. We can't just tell people the food supplies, consists of these 12 items you should buy organic. What about all the rest? So we looked at the data. Again, all of it comes from the pesticide data program that came about after the ALAR crisis in 1988, 1989, when the acting EPA administrator said to 60 Minutes, if ALAR came into our program today, it would never be allowed. But because it's grandfathered in, I can't take it out. Acting administrator of EPA says this on 60 Minutes. Well, of course, parents are thinking, WTF? you're telling me that there's something at that time, it was the most carcinogenic pesticide regulated by the agency. It wasn't really even a pesticide, it's a growth regulator, like chlormequat now. Most carcinogenic, steepest cancer slope factor, right? And the head of EPA says, yeah, I wouldn't let it into the market now, but because it's in already, you have to keep eating it. Well, that's why people threw out their apple juice, and there was a big crisis. That was not good. We didn't think it was good at the time. We weren't, EWG didn't even exist. But
I was on the sales desk when that one hit too.
Yeah, and it was bad. It was bad. And but what we did say to people when we were putting this together, let's put together a counterpart. When we look at these data, there are lots of fruits and vegetables that have great nutritional value. I'm looking at them on our screen right now. Lots of fruits and vegetables that have great nutritional value that don't have pesticides, even though they're farmed conventionally. Let's talk about those. Now, the reason we've been embraced by the organic industry is not because we've talked about the benefits of conventional fruits and vegetables that don't have pesticides. It's because organic companies like what we've done to raise the awareness about organic. But just as important to us is this notion that there are fruits and vegetables out there that just because of advances, most of them that are generated by farmers trying to save money, trying to do things right, some of them forced on the industry by reentry intervals and spraying limits and other label restrictions. The industry didn't want any of it. They were forced on by advocates and by regulatory processes. But the end result is you have a lot of produce items that don't have pesticide residues to speak of. That's a win. So when we launched the Dirty Dozen and the Clean 15 under the banner of the Shopper's Guide, both of these elements were there. And we didn't really think it was making much sense in 2004 to make a heavy recommendation that you should only buy organic. Although when you look now at the list of foods on the Dirty Dozen, the organic industry has responded and come back with a vengeance to produce. I mean, Todd, you would know better than anybody. The organic strawberry market, blown up, right? Yeah. Organic spinach, organic kale, organic pears. You can get those, nationwide now. Certainly apples, the Alar fruit. You can get those at a Safeway or a Giant anywhere around the country, and at pretty close to the price of the conventional. So we didn't know any of that was happening going forward. We just wanted to make sure that when we told people, A, eat produce, don't eat Twinkies. I guess Twinkies don't exist anymore, but anyway, there you go. That's good. Eat produce, don't eat junk food. And when you do, if you're concerned about pesticides, here's our thought about what you should try and buy organic.
I think that it's also really important to realize when you look at that list, and especially the Dirty Dozen that's on the list, is what consumers see and what it is that they do and what it is that they understand. So we have a lot of people that look at the list and say, oh my God, I should not eat collards or kale. Well, you know what? There's a lot of people in this country.
Okay, let me ask you a question.
I'm not finished. Oh my God.
Please.
Shouldn't eat blueberries anymore. And that's critically important. And so, every single one of those items that is on that list does provide nutritional benefit to the body. So when we're talking about explanation, it is education that needs to be part of it. It's choices that need to be part of it. It's having people live within their price point that need to be part of it. Otherwise, none of us are doing the best job that we can in terms of helping people to optimize their health.
Mano, you go, because I know you. Yeah. Because my question to you, Mano, just so you know, I mean, obviously, you probably know where I'm headed with it. It's like, tell me, what's up with you with this list?
I have a lot of response, and I really enjoyed this conversation so far and what Ken brought up. So let's start with mixture, right? We talk about a lot around mixtures and how do the mixtures react in our body and stuff like that. And if that was the case, almost any food we eat, whether it's meat or produce or whatever, it all has carbon. We drink water. Does that mean that the carbon is now going to react with the oxygen in water and produce carbon dioxide in all our body? That's not how reactions happen in our body. Things just suddenly start producing. Now, each and every chemical is tested individually. Hundreds of tests that take place, right, for the safety at an individual level. Again, a very simple example. If you were making a cookie, and if you tested your salt, your sugar, your flour, your chocolate chip, and everything for safety, and you put together the cookie, there isn't a chemical reaction that would happen in cookie and produce such a nasty chemical that it's going to kill you at the end of the day. If you keep eating cookies, then there will be other side effects if you just eat a lot of cookies. But that's not how chemistry works, that you take these trace amounts of residues in food, then suddenly somehow it's going to get into your gut and a chemical reaction will start and it becomes one of a nasty chemistries or a carcinogen. That's not how chemistry works. So that's one thing around testing each and every pesticide to the extent possible, AIs and active ingredients to the extent possible, to look at its risk, its hazard and safety, and look at all those data points before you say, okay, this is something which is acceptable for food use, non-food use. So that's one piece. Second piece, I hear this all the time, right? The industry just pushes for pesticide use, for growers to apply as much pesticide as possible. Okay, yeah, maybe the industry would do that, but these pesticides are not free. As a grower, you have to pay money to buy these pesticide and apply it on your crop. And if you don't need to apply it, why would you buy more and more pesticide and apply it to your crop? It does not make economic sense if you're trying to, as a grower, if my motive is to maximize profit, why would I want to increase my input costs so that my profit goes down? So the use of pesticide, and Ken mentioned about food additive as well, that adding, and I worked in the past in food additive as I was in the GMA space. The notion that companies would just add more and more additive or let farmers use more and more pesticide, that notion is flawed, because it costs money for these additives or for the pesticides to be used, and that would reduce the profit. And there is a technical functionality, and whether we talk about additive, salt, you need it in a certain level, sugar, you need it at a certain level. If you're a pesticide, you need it at a certain level as long as it is efficacious and effective to control the pest. You do more, it may spoil the crop. It will spoil the food if you add too much salt. No one is going to buy it. So that's on the industry pushing for more and more use of pesticides. Then what else was there? Let me finish this one.
Please go ahead.
On the Dirty Dozen, and absolutely, it's all based on USDA PDP data. And if you look at the Dirty Dozen, and what it's doing is it's identifying all the 12 crops where you have some pesticide residue, irrespective of whether that pesticide residue is way under the limit that EPA suggests or above the limit. I mean, those which are above the limit or those where there's a violation, it should not be used in crop X and it has been used, absolutely those should be highlighted. And anyone saying consumers are crazy to get more information is wrong. Consumers, as you said, we are all CEOs of our body, and anyone wants to have more information on what's in their food or what residue, they absolutely have the right to know the detail of the information they want before, whether it's food or whether it's something else. We all want to make the right decisions for ourselves, for our family. Now, going back to the Clean 15, where does the Clean 15 focus? If you look at the USDA report says 84% of the food products, the commodities they tested is under the legal limit. Now, Ken and I may disagree whether legal is safe or not, but that's separate. If you look at the Clean 15 that EWG produces, that Clean 15 is based on the 15% of food where USDA, 15% of commodity where USDA did not find any residue, right? They did not find any residue, true, because the methods we have today, the science where we are today, we can only detect maybe parts per billion or parts per trillion. If the science advances and we can detect whatever comes after part per trillion, if we can detect much lower, infinite amounts of the residue, then the level of quantification, if it keeps going down and down and down as science advances, will EWG then come and say, hey, look, what we said was clean 15 in 2015 or 2023 is no longer clean 15 because now we can detect even one single molecule of that pesticide because science has evolved. So even that clean 15 is not going to be stable. So what are we really focusing on? We should be focusing on where the violations are, where there is exposure rather than where it is under the legal limit. Again, Ken and I may disagree on legal and safe. That's a separate conversation.
Well, then let me ask this. Hold on.
27 is just looking at that. Yes. So.
Right.
So yeah,
let me ask this question. Let me ask this question from where we're at right now. And this is to everybody. Would you all agree with me that processed foods that are high in fat, sugar, salt are bad? Yes or no?
Okay, so let's really think about that definition of
no.
process. No, I'm not done.
Yeah.
So a processed food is.
Let's take the word process out. Let's just take process out.
No, let's take that out of it. Okay. So do we need to have fat in our diet? Yes, we do. Should we eat a diet that's no fat? No, we should not. When we think about the word sugar, what are we talking about? Are we talking about fructose? Are we talking about lactose? Are we talking about oligosaccharides? Are we talking about maltose? Because that's a very broad term. I mean, you put that out there and think, oh, don't have any. Well, that means then you're not eating any fruits and vegetables. So we really need to be careful. This is exactly why consumers are confused, because we have these things out there of like bullying around food items without giving somebody a viable solution.
I'm not quite sure my question would be considered bullying, quite frankly, because I'm only asking the question and I took the word process out out of respect for what you just said. So I'll ask the question again. Are foods that are high in salt, high in fat, and high in sugar bad?
So first of all,
it's a yes or no.
Do we have olive oil? Okay, no, because olive oil, is that high in fat? Yes.
Okay, great.
Healthy food, it is, fine.
So let me rephrase
let's answer the question appropriately.
Yeah. No, I can answer it a
apple
different
high
way.
in sugar, an apple is high in sugar. It's fructose. So I would say the way you're answering the question, I'm not going to say yes, because that would not be the right answer.
Well, then I'll rephrase it this way. We label food with the sugar, salt, and fat content in it, correct? We can all agree on that. All right, so perfect. So let's just go with that. So then let me ask this question based upon that, because we want to talk about informing people. We want to talk about what you say, Leslie, is that everybody's fearful of the dirty dozen. It scares people, which I'm not going to disagree with you, because people can think that I don't know what everybody thinks. I've not come across that. I've come across, different opinions in that. That's fine. That's a different debate. So let's ask the question this way. So we've kind of agreed that those three things are bad. We put them on labels. Or not bad, whatever. They're on labels. So let me ask this. Should we be putting pesticides on food labels so consumers can make a choice about what they want to eat, just like we put on sugar, salt, and fat? Should somebody know that the food was treated with Roundup? Should somebody know it was treated with some stuff that may glow in the dark if they eat it a whole bunch? I don't know. It's a question. Yes or no? What do you think? And is there a downside to that? Is there an upside to that?
Oh, we have a couple lists that might help them. Anyway.
I mean, it's a simple question. I mean, should we start labeling our food to give people a better choice so the fear is not there? Because if you're fearful that the dirty dozen is making people not eat produce, then let's just stand behind it. I mean, look, Mano, you guys talk about pesticides. Right? Why not put it on the labels?
I mean, what is the ultimate purpose, right? With that information? Sure, I'm always pro information, pro transparency, however you want to share it, whatever information. I mean, the whole food industry moving to blockchain and whatnot, where things were produced, how it was produced, capturing each and every transaction. Absolutely. I mean, that's the way transparency should head. Now, what do you do with that information? If you are driving the fear of a pesticide, you are ultimately, whether you like it or not, driving fear towards the food. Now, to your previous question on, is processed food bad or good? I would say anything in moderation is good. If you just eat one type of food, candies or this or that, it is bad. So eat moderate, eat a balanced diet. That's what you should be eating in general. Now, how information is used and what people do with that information. If you are trying to scare people, because look,
I'm not asking about scaring people. Stop with scaring. I'm not coming from scaring. Let's stop with scaring people. Let's talk about the fact that we're talking that you want people to know what the pros are. Ken's talking about what his side of it is. Leslie has her side. I'm coming from a perspective of, should we, as a country, as people that eat food, as people that look to the future of our planet, our global community, and all the things that food affect, Should we be completely transparent with the American consumers and the global world that says, this is what's in our food? If you're concerned, here's everything that's in this can of beans or this bag of pasta or this vegetable.
But okay, the can of beans, right? Let's just take the can of beans or a bag of beans or whatever you want to call it. Now, isn't that list, I would say, isn't that information already available? What pesticides?
I have no idea what pesticides.
Yeah,
It goes
what
back to my other
pesticides-
question. What happens when they blend?
What pesticides are available or are acceptable or
Sure.
approved for use on beans? Yes, that list is available. At what rate and how often? All that information is available publicly. Someone can go and see if it's a conventionally grown pesticide.
You cannot.
You
look at
mean
a
on the
can of beans.
label?
No, I'm talking
No,
about
no,
on
no,
the
it's-
label. I'm talking about you walk in the grocery
search the
store.
databases, MRL databases and other databases to find what pesticides are approved for, cultivating corn, cultivating bean, what the residue limits are. All that information is available.
Yeah.
Now,
I'm not talking about the website. Let's go back to the question. And that's just the answer to the question I want. Should we put pesticides and I'll go broad as chemicals. Like I said, when I pick up my Bob Ross positive energy drink right here, should I be able to look on there and see every single thing that's in there? Same thing with fruits and vegetables. Same thing with everything in the American diet. Should we have that labeling on packaging? Yes or no?
Again, that's not my packaging to say yes. It should.
You're a
or
consumer,
should not be.
man, like everybody else. Leslie's a
But
consumer. Ken's a consumer. I'm a consumer.
what I'm saying is I'm pro-transparency.
So that's a yes. So is that a yes?
All I'm saying is I am pro-transparency. What I'm saying is that's not my food package, that's someone else's. It's for them to make that decision. Whether
should the U.S. government come in? Should we make regulations that says that pesticides should be on labeling? Period.
I think we should have a discussion. I'm always open for discussion on any topic. Yes, we should have.
I love it. Leslie, Ken, how about you? Any thoughts?
I think that people should be aware of what is in foods. I think people should be able to then, it's the choice of what it is that they're going to buy. I think the more access there is to produce is critically important, that people get what they need within
100%.
the price point. This is the goal across the aisles.
100%. Ken?
Yeah. No, I think that's right. That's part of why we did this, as I tried to explain, is that there are no labels on apples. And so we wanted people to know what the government's own tests found when they prepared apples as is for consumption, washed, peeled, et cetera, in the case of apples. So just a couple of points. One, just to go back, Mano, we're not talking about chemical interactions in the body between salt and cookie dough or whatever. We're talking about, is there any reason to be concerned about the addition of multiple synthetic neurotoxic agents that we consume over the course of a day from a whole wide range of things?
Sure.
We can agree to disagree, but we don't have any way to regulate that. We don't bother regulating it. And my thinking is, I think people should know that if they're pregnant or if they have a little kid or whatever, that there are lots of vectors coming in. And the government's usually pretty slow to regulate them. The most recent example is PFAS, right, which we've been working on for 23 years at EWG. These Teflon and Scotchgard chemicals that are in all of us now. And the EPA has finally said, we think it should be regulated in drinking water at 4 parts per trillion. After 60 years of saying nothing but it's fine. So I do think it's important for people to get ahead of things and have a right to have access to information, certainly about chemicals that are in regulatory jeopardy. The second thing is, I think we're forgetting here that one of the drivers that has come out of, and I'm Todd, I would, if you think otherwise, please speak up. But one of the drivers that has happened here is that as we have published some of this information, it has driven the market for organic.
I would agree. It's made an awareness. Yeah, it's increasing awareness.
That has in turn.
And you did say some of your funding comes from organic manufacturers.
Yeah.
So you are doing it for your members.
Yeah, we did.
Right. Well, but to be fair, so are you. So don't take a cheap shot. That's why I threw it out there. That's why it was in the very beginning of the show.
It's all about
no.
I know.
No. But I just want to say that in addition to the shift towards organic within crop production, certainly in California, and I would say the West Coast. It's a different kettle of fish for other crops in the rainy parts of the country, where pest pressure is just so enormous that it's really hard to break away. But here, more and more farmers are adopting organic type methodologies, even if they aren't fully organic. You see it in the pesticide data all the time that comes out of California that's reported in detail. So what I'm saying is that part of the dynamic that's happening here, and this is for you as well, Leslie, part of the dynamic is happening here is that consumers are making a connection and making a preference in the marketplace, and the economy is responding. The environmental health economy is responding and saying, hey, you know what? Driscoll's is growing out their organic berry business, and farmers all over California are moving away from methyl bromide, and because it was banned, and other toxic chemicals. They're moving in the direction of safer chemistry. That is partly the dynamic within the pesticide industry with invention and science. Hats off that that's happening. Part of it is also regulatory pressure that your industry has always fought, and also a lot of interest on the part of farmers, particularly in California, but also in other Western states. They want to sell to the market. The market for organic apples has blown up over the past 10 years, right? And they're now producing them pretty close to the price point for conventional. It's closed up. So all I'm
technology's
saying is
helped that.
there's a virtuous cycle here that informing consumers can lead to better technology, just as something that comes out of a lab at a pesticide company.
Yeah, and again, informing consumers, always supportive of that. What my pushback was, and my comment is around, again, people should have choice: organic, conventional, regenerative, sustainable,
that's not a debate.
Agriculture. That's not the point here. But using organic to demean conventional or a different kind of food, and using that for fear-mongering purposes, that's something that I cannot get on board with. So let me put it that first. And then a few other points. As we talk about the regulated company and industry, yes, we fight regulation, you say that, but we are also the one asking for more money from Congress. We are also the one, our industry just increased the fees it pays to EPA by 30% for regulating us. Yes, we fight on the science, and as any scientist would do, I want to see the data, I want to look at the science and ask questions, right? So that's how science evolves. So yes, we are regulated, we fight with EPA and disagree, but that's on the basis of science. And at the same time, we ask agency to get more scientists so that they can regulate us more. So you can think that we are not afraid of regulation, we stand by our data. So those are the two things I would say. And from a technology and innovation perspective, look, now we are looking at technologies like see and spray. So right now where application happens, it's all over the field, right? When you're doing an herbicide application specifically. With these technology coming up with AI, the tractors are moving with cameras and nozzles, making a real-time determination of, is this a weed or is this a plant? And if it's a weed, spray on the weed. Don't spray on the plant. And that reduces 80-90% of more pesticide use. So yes, anything that we can do from a technology point of view to reduce the farmer use of pesticide, we are looking at those technology and looking into science and innovation, and chemistry evolves, and new chemistries, there are hybrids coming up, which are mixtures of biological and conventional. So things are changing. And as we learn more, we'll look into more and more of these technological advancement in agriculture.
So I've heard the word fear multiple times here today in this conversation, that people are afraid of this list, right? And from what I can tell, I'll throw this question out and please help me with this one. I don't think there's anything on your list that's not true, right? It's all fact-based. I mean, I don't think you're making up things, right?
No. So let me again intervene, Todd. I did not say anything.
Oh no,
the dirty dozen is incorrect. It's entirely based
that
on PDP data, and it's good high quality data. But it is how you present that data and what message. You can slice and dice data. Look, I did data analytics for some time as well. How you slice and dice the data and what story you want to tell with that data,
for sure,
is
100%. We can get a report.
If you're using it for fear mongering, that's what I cannot get on board with. And that's where I said, what are you going to do with that? Hey, grower X, grower Y, grower Z, what pesticides did you use to grow your crop? And now that I know grower X is growing his beans using these pesticides, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to say no to grower X and not buy his produce. Ultimately, who are you affecting? Grower X. So that's the notion which I'm afraid of, that we are going to be misusing this information in the name of public information and boycotting a grower who is just trying hard to raise a crop, fight these pests and diseases. So
let's be clear,
really
nobody's
careful.
boycotting anybody. Nobody's boycting
No,
anybody.
I know.
Right? Well, I understand.
What I'm saying is this is what you can do with this information. Again, EWG data is absolutely based on PDP, but slicing and dicing that data to paint a different picture is not what we should be looking at.
So it goes back, right? Which is why I asked a question earlier about, should we just be cut to the chase and just put pesticides and chemicals on every label of American food so we can all just understand it and be educated? Because the best way we're going to eliminate fear is by getting people to understand what they're afraid of and talking to them and not hiding behind it, right? It's a lot of what this is, in my opinion, a lot of what you're seeing, because it's kind of like, does the dose make the poison, right? And I think it's somewhat we've got to think about stuff like that. So
I have a 5-year-old and a 9-year-old, and most of the times they think their food is coming from a grocery store because they really don't know. They haven't been to a field, and here I am in the agriculture industry, so a little bit of shame on me. But we really, we need to educate them where the farm is, how farmers are growing their food and how they are being produced, and what kind of pressure, pest pressures, weed pressure they face, and what tools are available. So absolutely, when we are talking about educating the future generation, the next generation on these issues, we absolutely should do everything that these are the different forms of agriculture, conventional, organic, what it means. Pesticides are used in organic as well. They could be biological pesticide, they could be copper sulfate, who knows? One of the things I'll tell you, if caffeine if we tried to put caffeine as a pesticide, I don't know if it would go through the regulatory approval process, if it will pass the toxicity test.
Well, and to be fair, you could put a little dish soap in a squirt bottle with water and get rid of your aphids on your vegetables in the backyard, right? Anything that kills a pest is, considered a pesticide. I get that. So let me ask this question as we're kind of wrapping up a little bit, kind of hanging with our time. And, I think about this. It's like, how do we overcome all this, right? And fear, how do we overcome the fear? How do we get people to come alongside this message? So in some of the conversation that we've had today, it got me thinking about this a little bit. And here's where I want to go with this. There's a lot of data out there. There's a lot of reports. And to the point, you can get any report written you want to pay for and get anybody to sign off. But let's just be clear. We all know that to be the rules, right? We can all play that game. But there's data in the government. They talk about stuff. You've got the American Academy of Pediatricians talking about pesticides, blah, 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 all this stuff, right? So it's all out there for the read. So here's my question. And I think when you think about finding pesticides in the umbilical cord blood of a newborn, right? That's legit. That's like everybody to me, that's a pause moment. It's like, wow, that's kind of wild. I mean, what's that really mean? And to the average consumer, they don't really have an idea what that means, because a lot of them may not even have heard that before. So when you think about that, and you think about pesticides and pediatricians saying this, look, risk of cancers, ADHD, autism, these things are on the rise in this country, right? It's all data that's out there. It's not fear mongering, it's fact. So when I think about that, and you think about back to the umbilical cord thing, because that always just warps my mind a little bit when you think about what that is, especially the number of it, right? Depending on what study you look at, right? It's multiple studies. So all three of you, what advice would you give a pregnant mother right now about the claims about buying produce?
It is critically important to buy produce. There's enough benefit, the research benefit from the phytonutrients and the micronutrients that are in those food items that support the health of the mom and the baby. And having a cart devoid of those items is not in the best interest. Yes,
how do you address the umbilical cord issue? How do you say, how would you address, how would you address it? So she came up and said, look, tell me about pesticides in the umbilical cord. Should I be worried about the 185 or whatever the number was that was in the umbilical cord? Should that be something I should be concerned about when I buy produce?
I think what a pregnant woman should be concerned about is not consuming produce or feeling worried about consuming produce or not being able to afford it because it's out of her price point. That would be far more detrimental to her health as well as to the health of the baby.
Okay. Mano, Ken?
Go
Yeah,
for it,
I
Ken,
well,
please.
I would say you can and should. It's vital to eat plenty of fresh fruits and vegetables, fresh especially. But as Leslie said, fruits and vegetables generally are important to eat, and you can do it without having to worry about pesticides. We have a guide that helps you, and you can do it affordably. And then just one final point I would make is, we oftentimes we've had thrown at us that that poor people are being scared away from eating produce by our report. There's no data that suggests that. There was one survey study that actually kind of showed the opposite that keeps getting cited. But let me just put it this way. If you're pregnant, my feeling is you should avoid as many exposures to these toxic chemicals you can, and you can't avoid all of them. And if you're at some place and there's a wonderful conventional spread of fruits and vegetables, you should eat it instead of eating the fried cheese stick or whatever. You should eat the healthy stuff. And then the final point is, I hear all this concern about low-income folks, but I don't see anybody hardly at all out there lobbying to protect these benefits in these programs for nutrition assistance. It's an extremely small group that's defending that right now. We happen to be one of the groups that has done that for 20 years. Our top priority in every farm bill, where they hand out all the federal farm subsidies, our top priority is protecting the SNAP program, used to be called food stamps, because we want low-income people to have access to food. If you're worried about pesticides in food, you should be worried that they don't have food. And so from our standpoint, one way we could come together would be to say, look, let's make sure from a financial standpoint, for those who don't have the wherewithal, we should not be cutting their benefits as is being discussed now in Congress. And if you don't take my word for it, look at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities. We're talking about maybe millions of kids losing the benefits in their household. I'm not saying it has to be organic that you eat. I'm just saying we want them to have the money to buy food, or in this case, the nutrition assistance.
Understood.
And,
Leslie?
and I couldn't agree more with Ken. It's all about food security. Everyone should have access to food. That's the most important thing that we should all get behind. I mean, I was born in India and I grew up there before I went to college in the UK and then US. And I've seen food insecurity closely, and I know what it is. So access to food and plenty affordable, nutritious food is what we should all be striving for. And, the recent report from FAO, WHO on World State of Hunger is scary, because I think I'm saying recent, but even the 2019 report said malnutrition is close to a billion people, 900 or something, and it has risen for the first time in several years. And post-pandemic, I'm afraid it's only gone up. And, we really cannot have a population of 1+ billion who are malnutritioned or, don't have enough to eat. We absolutely need to all work together to ensure that people have enough to eat. So that's one point. Second, what would be my advice to a pregnant woman? And, we were pregnant a few years back. Now our youngest is 5 years old. A balanced diet. And, eat everything and eat a balanced diet. That's the most important thing from a nutrition point of view. Eat produce, eat fish, eat meat, eat milk, eat your fried cheese as well. I mean, why not? It's those fried things which gives you a little bit of happiness, guilty pleasures. Yes, I mean, candies, chocolates, why not? It should be a balanced diet. Now, to your point on cord blood, right? And identifying these residues. Just because our analytical methodology has advanced so much that we are able to detect maybe one particle of salt in a swimming pool of water, what does that really mean from a risk perspective? Just because you can detect that 1 grain of salt in a large Olympic-sized swimming pool.
Sure.
Should you be really worried? And I will challenge you, Todd. And we talked about data and perspective. See, you talked about cancer and you talked about ADHD and autism. Yes, absolutely. Maybe the numbers are going up and we are getting better in detection and whatnot. We are exposed to a lot of things. But the very second thing you said in your sentence was pesticides. So people hear what we are saying. You say cancer, ADHD, autism, and then you say pesticide residue. I mean, what does it take for people to connect the dots? And here is, someone making those connections. So again, as a scientist, I do believe that it's my responsibility to choose specifically what words I'm using, how I'm using it, what data and facts do I have to support something or not support something. But at the same time, what is most essential is, and I want to thank you for facilitating this conversation with Leslie and Ken. And it's a great honor and opportunity to meet Ken, who has been in this space for years. He have worked with Jay, but I didn't have an opportunity to meet with Ken. So really happy to meet with him today and
likewise
support what EWG is doing on EPA funding. So these are the conversations that we need to have, whether it's label, whether it's transparency, and that's the only way we are going to advance and make progress. Again, I'm a scientist. I don't know how Congress works or doesn't work these days mostly, but we all need to work together as the American people.
And I just want to add to that, to your point, Mano, about food security. Let's take it one step further and let's talk about nutrition security, because sometimes you can even have enough food and that doesn't guarantee that you are well nourished. And I think that this is passion for all of us. And there's ways for us to all connect and find those solutions so that people can eat the very best that they can. So there may be some things that we disagree on, but I think at the end of it, this passion, this commitment, this wanting people to nourish themselves to the best of their ability, that's the glue that binds us. And Todd, thank you for bringing us all together.
No, it's a pleasure.
One more pregnancy point.
I'm saying something, so you go.
I'm not an expert.
Don't say you're pregnant, because that's going to screw up the whole show.
No.
Okay.
It would be a miracle, and an unhappy one. But if you look at the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology, what they say is that it's important to reduce prenatal exposure to toxic environmental agents, including pesticides.
Correct.
So, and it doesn't matter which major scientific society you're looking at, the Endocrine Society, American Lung, even the Thoracic Society, on and on. All of them have come out just in recent years and said, you know what, this toxic chemical thing, often including pesticides, invariably including pesticides, this is not nothing. This is not nothing in the course of the diseases we're trying to deal with here. So I think in terms of scaring people, I don't consider this a scary thing from the gynecologists of the world, but I do think it's informed. Yeah.
Right. And I think that's really important. And I think that's what I was hoping and to get across. And now come alongside what you just said, Ken, because I've got a website here for the National Institute of Environmental Health and Science. And this is their kids page. And it says right here for parents, I'm quoting right off of the website, pesticides may be particularly harmful to young children. Repeated exposure to some pesticides over time can cause cancer. That's a government writing.
What kind of exposure?
Exposure to pesticides. I don't have my glasses, so hang with me, brother.
Dietary exposure.
I can't. My arms aren't long.
I would definitely not recommend children to take a bottle of pesticide and start spraying.
Absolutely,
so,
but it says if you're worried.
I don't think they're talking about that.
Listen, I'm always going to get into the weeds.
Right.
This is environmental health and safety you are quoting. It's most probably going to be occupational exposure.
But what they also talk about here too, and they have a section here for the kids to read, like what your kids know. It says, did you know unwashed fruits and vegetables can have traces of pesticides on them? So look, at the end of the day, it's not fear, it's fact. And the problem lies is that we lead with fear as opposed to leading with fact. And I don't believe that the Dirty Dozen list is fear-based. I don't believe it's designed to make people freak out, because I've been living with it since 2004. Every single year since it's come out, I know exactly what it is. I've lived through ALAR, and I've lived to build an organic industry that's pretty darn big today. And I get it. And again, as I told you all in the beginning, my number one goal is go eat an apple. My job was to convince you to eat the organic one. But I'm glad you're eating the damn apple, because that's how we're going to win the day and change this planet. I'm on board, right? And I think we all are the same. Yeah. So as we wrap this thing up, one of the things that I think about in all of this, and I go back to some of the questions that we have, is I think about the longevity of ourselves, right? Pesticides have been around, really actively used in this country since the 30s. I mean, you can go all the way back to 2500 BC and all of that stuff. You can go find all kinds of cool stuff you get on the Google machine long enough. But, we don't know what the real long-term effect is, right? We don't know exactly what it is going to be. Now, let me finish, Mano, real quick. We don't know exactly everything. We can, to your point, we can learn as we go, just like change, just like realizing over time, hey, you know what, that was bad. We need to take it off the market, right? We're learning as we go. And I get that, right? That's part of growing as society and rapid pace, no different than AI and all the things, the crazy stuff's going to do. So I think about this, and I guess my question to kind of wrap this up a little bit is that, are we all really comfortable in saying that the long-term exposure to pesticides, to chemicals, to the things that we're exposed to in our food are really good for our health long-term? Like, is that really okay?
Let me just quickly chime in.
Please.
We say exposure, long time exposure. I get it, but exposure, you have to define exposure. There is a reason, there is a science, and there is a level of exposure, right, through everything. Now, if you talk about, let me get a simple example. We breathe air. Right? We all breathe air, and there are different types of gases in air. There is carbon dioxide, a little bit of monoxide, nitrogen, oxygen, all of that is there. We are exposed to it all the time. Now, we know if I'm in this room, and there's only carbon monoxide in this room at a high concentration, what's going to happen to me? Versus if I keep breathing the air in this room, I will be fine. So when we talk about exposure, let's also take into account the level of exposure.
Long term, though. I mean, how do you judge the level of exposure, though, if you don't know what you're being exposed to? I mean, it goes back to the labeling of packaging. If you don't want to have ABC chemical in your life, we don't have a choice in this country not to have that, because people don't have access to that information. Yeah. So I don't think we can base. I mean, again, hold on one second. I mean, I get what you're saying, but it's kind of speculative. It's like, well, yeah, you don't have the finite data, but you don't know what my life's going to end up in another 20 years. I don't know what your life's going to end up in another 20 years, right? Based upon what we do and what we're eating. Back to the Twinkie thing. Like, if you eat a whole bunch of them, you're going to have a problem with that. Ken, you have a thought? I think Mano.
Well, yeah, I think, air is a good example, but there are many others where over time, in answer to your question, the conclusion that has gelled in mainstream science and certainly in regulatory science, in case after case, is that reducing exposures is good.
Yeah.
I mean, look at the Clean Air Act, the queen of federal environmental protection laws, right? I have my days when I think it's the only federal law that's actually protection law that's still working, in the sense that it's advancing and cleaning up contaminant after contaminant. All of the levels that were, agreed to early on have all gone down. The agencies pushed it. The same with pesticides. No one's coming to the market now with the kind of pesticides that were introduced and said were safe 30 years ago.
Right.
Not happening. Same with drinking water contaminants. The agency's been notoriously struggled to regulate drinking water contaminants for all kinds of mostly political and economic reasons. But the fact of the matter is that when they do finally take regulatory action, the acceptable levels go down. And so the whole trend of modern science that concerns itself with the interaction of chemicals, pollution, contaminants, and health has been that we now know it's not just genetics, and we know it's not just exposure, it's how the two come together. It's what you bring to the party genetically with maybe your distinctive vulnerability. And that, along with concern about kids not being little adults, they're especially vulnerable, among other things we learned from just straightforward toxicology, has driven these levels down. So a consumer looking at this is not crazy and not responding to fear to think, you know what? I think if there's something I can do to avoid some of these exposures, they'll probably eventually regulate them anyway. I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to wait till my kid is in college.
Back to choice.
To avoid that exposure. So
Yeah.
that's the whole weight of it. And all of these regulatory agencies are being informed by these scientific associations, some of which I mentioned. I'll drop a bunch of them to you so you can put them out there,
Sure.
including the Academy of Pediatrics, who are basically saying, you know what? Avoid these exposures because of the uncertainty that you just mentioned, Todd, because we don't know where it's going to go down the road. We don't know about mixtures. We discover new things all the time, but the more we discover, the lower the acceptable limits tend to become.
Well, you brought up a good point. It reminded me of a product that was out in the 50s called Tag, which was something you could buy at the grocery stores, 5% DDT, and it was used for the house to get rid of moths and bed bugs and stuff. So when you think about it, big bold letters on the packaging, 5% DDT, which we all, that's not a good item. We can all agree on that. That wasn't the best choice we ever made. But, it is what it is, and it's out there. But to your point of how we've evolved and all the other things, Mano, I know you dropped off as we were talking. I want to give you a chance to close out, and Leslie will close out as well.
Yeah, sorry, my power on the laptop went, so I had to change to.
Well, we went a little longer than we anticipated.
No, this is great conversation. Again, I mean, for a Friday evening, this is a wonderful conversation. I know you mentioned a next talk around aliens, so please do invite me. I do want to.
I'm down, dude. You're in. Done.
We are doing on an alien, but
Mano, I have a tinfoil hat. I have a tinfoil hat. It's real for me.
Love it. But one thing important is, I was mentioning about exposure and the level of exposure. That is certainly something to always consider. We are always exposed to chemical and DNA everywhere, where we breathe, what we eat, what we drink, what we wear, talk about all different routes of exposure. But the most important thing is, yes, people have concerns, there are uncertainty, and that's where science evolves. And, our responsibility as industry representatives, as NGOs, is to ensure that, and EWG, again, thank you, is doing that, ensure that we have the resources at the federal level to regulate these substances. They have the money, they have the people to do that. The minute we take some information on what someone's put out and start questioning and, start working towards eroding the trust on these regulatory agencies, it has a severe downfall. Look, I'm going to go back to the vaccine and COVID incident. So many people, because of uncertainty, did not get vaccinated. Because, hey, I don't want to put this, and okay, to an extent, it is a choice. They don't want to put something in their child's body or an adult body, which they simply don't understand. But a lot of the public is simply not there to understand what the FDA has approved and what these vaccines are. I don't understand it as well. I just went, okay, the FDA has approved it, has reviewed the data. It is safe. It is saving life. I'm going to go take it myself and go give it to my children. So there is uncertainty, but at the end of the day, I am not going to be the expert in everything, where I need to have certain levels of trust on these federal agencies. And as soon as you start eroding the trust with federal data and however you want to wrap it and whatever message you want to pass, think about the disservice you are doing. And again, I'm not saying anything about in general, the Dirty Dozen report. I'm saying think about how you are using data and how you are packaging the data and the messaging for your purposes.
Leslie, something to close or thought behind all that?
At the end of the day, we would all agree that this collaborative effort to help people increase their produce consumption, I don't think anybody would argue that point. In whatever way that we can, giving people a choice. Choice is the word we heard a lot today, and yes, that's important. Giving people informed information so that they can do what works best for them. These are the things that we want to do, that we should be doing, that we need to continue to do, and be the advocates for consumers out there. That's really how we can all work together.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, as we started this time and hanging out together a little bit and chatting, it's really about leading with love and kindness. It's about having conversations that matter. It's about disagreeing, but not drawing a line in the sand of the disagreement, because again, it's just about, let me learn more, change my opinion, right? Let me be informed. And I think that's something that we've done here. And I think we've done it really, really well. I say this all the time, and I believe this wholeheartedly, is that I don't want to tell you what to think. But I really, really want to make you think. right? I feel like that's what this platform is about. It's what I built this thing about. This is what we try to do is we want people to come away from this not confused. Maybe they are confused, but if they are confused, to get on the Google machine and get unconfused, or reach out and ask questions and get involved, because we have to value our food, right? Because food security is a part of that value equation, where we're going to be, how we're going to feed, the 10 billion people coming. And man, obviously the aliens that are coming too, we got to feed them. I don't even know what the hell they eat yet, but nonetheless, we're going to have to do that. And we have to be, working together to get to that solution. So I got to tell you, from the bottom of my heart, I am touched greatly by your time, your energy, your love, your compassion, your words, your honesty, your candor, complimenting me how good my hair looked. All of that meant the world to me today. I thank you all very, very much from the bottom of my heart for hanging out today. I really do.
Thank you very much, Todd. I really appreciate it. Coming in, I had no idea what this would be and how this would go. And here we are an hour and a half later, still having a great conversation with a smile on everyone's face. Ken, you are in the DC area, I believe. I would love to catch up whenever you have time and maybe, grab lunch, talk about food at the food dinner table, lunch table, and carry on the conversation. So I really enjoyed our discussion today, Todd. Thank you very much.
I hope I represented everything I said in the email to put this together was exactly what came out of here today, that it's going to be open and transparent and honest. And let's, like I said, lead with love and kindness, kids, and we can kick the world's ass so well. I just firmly believe that. We need to be doing more of it.
Yes.
Ken, thank you. I appreciate you. Leslie, I appreciate Mano. I appreciate, if I could give you all a hug right now, I would, but that would be really crazy and weird to do on a computer screen. So how about a fist bump to everybody?
Perfect.
All right, brother.
Thank you for being
Thanks
here.
so
I
much.
appreciate you all.
Leslie, thank you so much. Appreciate
Take
it.
care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, everybody, for being here today. I hope you enjoyed this incredibly informative conversation, especially from the angle driving love and kindness and courtesy and discussion around something that's a very polarizing topic, no two ways about it. I thank you for your time and attention. Thank you for supporting us. Thank you for the love you show us every day with this broadcast through our social media platforms. Check us out at TLC_Todd-versations. We put a lot of informative information out there. We want to change the conversation around food, and we're open to any part of that conversation, whether it's something I believe in or something I don't believe in. I'm not afraid of these conversations, because we have to have them. It's the only way we're going to move the ball down the field, is by working together to better understand each other. So thank you for being here. And remember, like I always say, go inspire somebody today. Just like this broadcast has inspired me to think a little harder about my food choices and what I'm doing, but go inspire somebody today. It's incredibly important that we do that. And you can make a difference in somebody's life just by saying hello. So take advantage of it, kids. I appreciate you all very much. Much love from me and my team and you. And of course, everybody that joined us today. Take care. Have a great rest of your day, and keep smiling out there, folks. See you.